Thirsty?
The truth about Sebastian is starting to emerge, and is Simon a killer? Let's break it down on this episode of What Happened. How's it going, y'all? Lisa here, and thanks for coming back to chat all things Shadowhunters. Today's episode, A Problem of Memory, finds Simon in quite the predicament, and we start to learn just who Sebastian really is. Plus, we get a little bit more of Magnus's backstory, so let's get this recap started. First up, let's talk about Magnus. Now, ever since Azazel caused Magnus and Valentine to switch bodies, Magnus has not been quite the same. The agony rune punishment he endured while in Valentine's body has definitely had quite the effect on him. Alec has noticed, but of course Magnus keeps saying he's fine. Throughout the episode, we see Magnus have flashbacks to when he was a child and he finds his mother dead. Alec is finally able to get Magnus to open up to him, and Magnus reveals that the agony rune made him relive his worst memory, and ever since then, he just can't get it out of his head. He sees it whenever he closes his eyes, hence why he hasn't been sleeping much and Alec's been waking up to an empty bed. It turns out that Magnus found his mother dead. She killed herself, and shortly after his stepfather found him and called Magnus an abomination and blamed him for his mother's suicide, saying she hated herself for giving birth to a monster. Young Magnus ended up lashing out with all the magic he had, burning and killing his stepfather. Magnus says he never wanted Alec to see this ugly side of him, and Alec wins boyfriend and just friend of the year for having the best response for Magnus.
There's nothing ugly about you.
Okay, so these two are freaking great together, I have to say, and even though we got a glimpse into that dark side of Magnus's past, I love getting more backstory on him, so I hope the show will continue to dive into that, maybe with a few happier times in his backstory. Now let's move on to Simon. Simon is basically heartbroken like a sad little puppy dog and going down a dark path after what happened at the Sealy Court with that kiss between Jace and Clary. He decides to go to the bar to drown his sorrows, and when he bumps into Quinn, who's always looked like trouble from the start, things aren't so good. Quinn and Simon end up doing a shot of plasma, aka the strong stuff, and Simon wants more, but unfortunately the bar has run out, so Quinn takes him somewhere else, to a bleeder's den.
I'm slipping. You can sit and watch it from a distance. You're so sick, how you love to watch me when you're kissing.
Now the place looks pretty magical and cool, but don't let all those colors and acrobatics fool you. It's basically where mundanes that know about vampires and crave vampire venom more than vampires crave blood go to be fed on by vampires. Simon ends up with a girl named Heidi, and the rest of the night is just a blur. Now Izzy is kind of the relationship love doctor in this episode, giving advice to both Jace and Clary on their whole love trial situation, as well as Alec with his whole Magnus situation. Now Izzy tells Jace to not butt in right now and tells Clary that it's okay to have feelings for two people at the same time. It happens. Simon wakes up with a bloody t-shirt and can't remember much, aka it's one hell of a hangover he has. Now Clary just won't give Simon his space to grieve and keeps calling him and shows up at his place. Simon quickly changes and basically tells Clary that all this isn't about her kissing Jace, but it's about the reveal of who she desires most. Simon asks Clary to look him in the eyes and tell him that she doesn't have feelings for Jace, and of course, Clary fails that test. After Clary leaves, Simon goes to throw his bloody shirt out and runs into Luke, who tells him to be careful with plasma. He also asks Simon if he's heard anything about vamps feeding on a mundane in Queens, because they found a dead girl's body and it was drained of blood. Simon says no, and as Luke is going back to his car, he gets a call, and Simon listens in, and he learns that the girl bled out from track marks, and the DNA that they tested has come back as none other than Simon Lewis, and let's just say Simon bolted the hell out of there. Luke informs Clary of the whole situation and heads off to look for Simon with Clary in tow, even though Luke says it's not a good idea. By now, we know Clary's not taking no for an answer when it comes to anything related to Simon. Simon thinks he's in deep water for killing this girl, so he goes to Raphael for help, but Raphael only offers to help Simon if he tells him how exactly he became a daylighter. Now that's not happening anytime soon, so Simon leaves and goes to retrace his steps from the night before. Luke's partner Ollie happens to show up, arrests Simon, And Simon just keeps saying, I'm sorry, it was all an accident. Now while Simon is sitting in the back of the police car, Ollie ends up revealing to Simon that Heidi, the mundane girl, bled out because of wounds to her feet that were the most recent ones, and Simon perks up and is like, wait a second.
I didn't do this.
Excuse me?
Ever since I was a kid, feet have totally grossed me out, even women's feet.
You know what grosses me out? Murder.
There's no way I could have done this. I didn't kill her.
So yeah, he decides he's gonna bust out of that car and he jets off. Simon now returns to the bleeder den looking for Quinn, who he walks up on and sees feeding off someone's, well, feet. And I have to say, I kind of agree with Simon. Feet are gross. Well, I'm actually not that creeped out with feet, but anybody that puts feet in their mouth for some reason, yeah, not going there. Well, Quinn tells Simon that killing Heidi was an accident, and Simon says he's going to tell everyone what Quinn did, and well, Quinn's not having that, so the two start fighting. Now while they're fighting, Clary and Luke show up, as does Raphael. Simon ends up killing Quinn, but bolts off when Clary attempts to talk to him. I mean, has Clary not learned yet that Simon just doesn't want to see her right now? Like, she just can't take a hint. I know she means well, but boy needs his space. Ollie meets with Luke at the Jade Wolf afterwards, and he asks her if she told anyone about Simon, and she says no. Well, that's a good thing. Raphael appears to use his mind compulsion to make Ollie forget everything about Simon and tells her that Daniel Quinn is the one who murdered the girl, but he's disappeared. I guess that clears everything up, right? However, I still kind of want to know what on earth Ollie is up to, especially with all those pics that she's been taking of Luke and Maya, the picture of the werewolf. Like, how long is it gonna take for that storyline to come out? Clary returns home to find Simon waiting for her, and he says that they'll always be friends and he can't imagine a world without her, but he just needs some time, and he's not quite sure yet how much time he needs. Clary finally, I think, starts to understand and says that whenever you're ready, I'll be here always. Okay, now let's talk about Sebastian, that creepy but charming Sebastian. He's not exactly who he seems to be, which I think by now we've all figured that out. We finally learn just who he has trapped in that closet. Now, the first scene we have of Sebastian in this episode, he's ironing and also just kind of ironing his hand as well. You know, I'm pretty sure that's not how ironing works, Sebastian. Well, a new shadow hunter has arrived in town, and she definitely throws a wrench into whatever plan Sebastian has. Her name is Aileen, and she's Sebastian's cousin, who was sent by his aunt to look for him since he's disappeared from the London Institute. Turns out back home, Sebastian was quite the square goody two-shoes, so learning that he had a yin-fin addiction and all this kind of stuff, it just didn't sound like him. Sebastian tries to come up with some excuses. He talks his way out of everything because he's charming and he just happens to do that to people. And then we see him rush home and rip the tape off the person in the closet.
Tell me everything there is to know about your cousin Aileen. Aileen, why? She is in New York. Tell me, or she dies.
Okay, so is this a doppelganger situation or something else? We gotta keep going to find out, right? Now I guess the Sebastian that we've come to know on screen, I'm gonna call him now Fake Sebastian since he's not the real one, knows everything that he needs to and manages to use his charm to convince Aileen that he's fine and she should go home and visit his aunt and tell her that everything's okay. So Aileen agrees and says she'll go home that night. Meanwhile, real Sebastian manages to break free from his bonds and runs out of the apartment heading for the Institute. Fake Sebastian returns home where a neighbor or the landlord has informed him that his front door was open, so now he's off to find injured real Sebastian where he's run off to. Aileen and Izzy are talking when real Sebastian, who's pretty banged up, has them in his sights. Like, he's almost through those gates to them when the fake Sebastian shows up, stabs him right in the back. Okay, so now who is this fake Sebastian really? Well, I'm gonna get to that reveal in a second, because before that happens, I have to talk about this transfer of Valentine to the Guard of Idris, because it all goes together. Alec has ordered Valentine to be moved and puts Izzy in charge of the operation, and she of course picks Chase as her right-hand man. We learn that Alec has not yet told the Clave about Luke trying to kill Valentine, and he doesn't plan on it. And they're also still trying to figure out who helped plan the attack on Valentine. Sebastian chimes in saying that he has some leads, but doesn't does he really? They end up removing Valentine's circle rune, and after Magnus gets back into the right headspace, they're ready to transfer Valentine. Magnus creates the portal, and the transfer starts with Jace and Izzy making their way through first, followed by the rest of their team. The grassy Shadowhunter, Duncan, is left in charge of walking Valentine through the portal, and from the moment he looks at Valentine and puts his hand on his shoulder, you know that something is about to go wrong. Now when Izzy and Jace arrive in Idris, they wait for everyone else to come through the portal, and they all do, except for Duncan and Valentine. I don't know why Jace or Izzy wouldn't have escorted Valentine themselves, been paired up with him. That would have made way more sense, and then this wouldn't have happened. Instead, Duncan has portaled Valentine to some shady dark room in a basement or something where Sebastian, fake Sebastian, is waiting for them. Turns out Sebastian has made Duncan do this by holding his family hostage, and now Duncan wants his family let go. But Sebastian, being the psycho that he is, goes back on his word that he'd release the family and ends up killing Duncan instead. Now when Valentine asks Sebastian what he wants from him, this happens.
Father.
Holy cow, how long did Will Tudor have to sit in makeup for that? I'm pretty sure he's in makeup, right? That is intense. And, well, if that means that Valentine is this guy's father, then Clary must be his sister, right? That missing brother we all thought Jace actually was Jonathan? Unless Valentine's knocked up a few other women as well, and all these kids are now searching for him. Alright, so, yeah, I am so curious to know just how Sebastian or Jonathan end up looking like that. And I guess we kind of know why he kept burning himself now with no pain. Now I gotta say props to Will Tudor in this episode for playing two roles. I'm always fascinated when people do that, play twins or doppelgangers or whatever in the same episode, because you gotta act off yourself, but not off yourself, because obviously there's a stand-in at that point. But how trippy to actually see the final scene and to be looking at yourself. I kind of wish we got to see a little bit more of the real Sebastian before he bit the dust, but I am excited to learn more about fake Sebastian's true form. I also have to say, Harry Shum Jr. did a great job in this episode as well, displaying this other side of Magnus that we've kind of seen in these past few episodes. You know, we're used to seeing Magnus kind of happy and eccentric and, pretty out there, but fun. But with this storyline, we definitely get more depth into Magnus, and I hope it continues. Alright, so what's in store for the next episode? How about we roll that promo?
I was torn up about everything that happened with Clary.
Have you been sending Evites out to this pity party?
What are you doing? That's impossible! Clave is keeping a massive secret.
We need to find Valentine.
Jace!
I have power that you could only dream of.
Oh, God.
Killing is always what I was best at.
Something's wrong with Jace.
So the synopsis for this episode says that Jace and Clary go out on an unsanctioned mission while Maya helps Simon out at a Yom Kippur family dinner. Okay, so Jace and Clary being out together means that they're going to have to finally talk about the kiss, right? And Maya hanging out with Simon, helping Simon, is that relationship going to bud again? Let me know all your thoughts on this episode and predictions for the next one down in the comments below or on my socials, and then you can click right over here to see my interviews with the cast of The Fosters. And if you like free stuff, go ahead and subscribe because, well, it's free. And yeah, I'll be back here real soon talking about more TV stuff. As always, I'm Lisa. Peace out.